During a luxury trip, a woman is left alone in one of the country's wildest areas. But what she finds there changes everything you thought you knew about instinct and protection. The luxurious penthouse apartment in Manhattan's Upper East Side was silent that morning. Lauren, sitting on the edge of the bed, ran her fingers over the Egyptian cotton sheets, feeling their texture. Her brown eyes, now devoid of light, turned toward the window, as if they could still capture the brilliance of the sun she knew was rising over the city. "Edward?" she called, her voice echoing through the empty bedroom. 6 months had passed since the diagnosis that changed her life. A cerebral venous thrombosis during pregnancy, a rare complication that doctors fought to control. "We can save the baby, or restore your vision," they said. For Lauren, there was no choice. Caleb was born healthy, while her eyes darkened forever. Edward's footsteps sounded down the hallway, firm and distant as his presence had been in recent months. "I'm here," he answered, with a voice that Lauren no longer recognized. Coldness had replaced the affection of before. "Do you still want to go on this trip today?" she asked, adjusting little Caleb in her arms. The 2-month-old baby squirmed restlessly. "Yes, everything's arranged. The helicopter will take us to Pine Ridge, and from there we'll continue by car. It'll do you good to get out of this apartment." Lauren wanted to believe those words. Since Caleb's birth, Edward, the powerful real estate mogul, seemed increasingly distant. The nights in separate bedrooms, the short conversations, the long silences. She felt something had broken between them. "Are you sure it's safe to take Caleb? He's still so small." "The doctor said there's no problem. Besides, I've hired a nurse who will meet us there. Stop arguing, Lauren. It's decided." The coldness cut like a blade. Lauren hugged her son tighter, feeling his warmth against her chest. Something inside her screamed that she shouldn't go, but the hope of reconnecting with Edward spoke louder. Hours later, the strong wind from the helicopter blades whipped her hair as Edward guided her across the helipad. The pilot helped accommodate the wheelchair, another consequence of the difficult birth, a temporary weakness in her legs that forced her to use it for longer distances. "It's just for a few weeks," the doctor assured her, "until you fully regain your strength." During the flight, Edward talked business on the phone, ignoring Lauren and the sleeping baby. She tried to imagine the landscape below, the Rocky Mountains stretching out in their majestic stone and green splendor. Places she had known on other trips, when her eyes could still admire the wild beauty of that piece of Colorado. "We're approaching," announced the pilot after nearly 2 hours of flight. In Pine Ridge, a pickup truck was waiting for them. The driver greeted Edward with familiarity. "Mr. Vega, everything is ready as requested. The house is stocked and the path to the lookout is marked, but I should warn you that there are reports of an animal loose in the area. Authorities are on alert." "What kind of animal?" asked Lauren, concerned. "Nothing to worry about," Edward cut in, "probably just rumors." The path to Edward's private country house was long and bumpy. The dirt road wound between rock formations and typical mountain vegetation. Caleb whimpered a few times, but soon fell back asleep in his mother's arms. "Where is the nurse you mentioned?" asked Lauren, realizing they were alone in the car. "There was an unexpected issue. He'll meet us tomorrow," Edward replied, his voice strangely calm. The house was cool and spacious, built in a privileged area with a view of an unexplored valley. At least that's how Edward described it, as he guided Lauren through the rooms. "Tomorrow, we'll take a special excursion," he announced during dinner, which took place in a disturbing silence. "There's a little-known lookout. The view is spectacular." "Edward," Lauren hesitated, "I feel like we need to talk. Since Caleb was born, since I lost my sight, you've been different." The silence that followed was more revealing than any answer. "I don't know what you're talking about," he finally replied, his voice masking something that Lauren couldn't decipher. "I'm tired. I'll sleep in the guest room." If this story interests you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give a like. Tell us which city you're watching from. We'll continue. The day dawned with the song of birds that Lauren didn't recognize, but whose distinct melodies she began to catalogue in her mind. Since losing her sight, her other senses had sharpened in surprising ways. It was as if the world now came to her through textures, sounds, and aromas, creating internal images as vivid as those her eyes once captured. "Edward?" she called, feeling the space beside the bed. No answer. The silence was absolute except for Caleb's cooing in the portable crib beside her. Lauren got up with difficulty, her legs still weak, and reached for her son, guided by the sound. The baby was awake, moving his little arms in the air. "Good morning, my love," she whispered, lifting him up and feeling his warm, soft body against her chest. "Let's find your father." With Caleb in her arms, Lauren felt her way to her wheelchair. She moved down the hallway, calling for Edward. The house seemed empty. In the kitchen, she found a thermos with still hot coffee and a note in Braille, a rare consideration from Edward in recent times. "Went to check the site for our excursion. Back soon. E." Something in the dry tone of the message bothered her. The Edward she had known years ago, the man she had fallen in love with, would have left an affectionate message, perhaps even a small surprise. This new Edward, distant and cold, left her with a feeling of discomfort that grew each day. After feeding Caleb and having coffee, Lauren decided to wait on the porch. The heat was intense, even in the early morning hours. The breeze carried the aroma of dry earth and vegetation, so characteristic of the Rockies. 2 hours passed with no sign of Edward. Lauren's phone, adapted for visually impaired users, announced noon. The heat increased and she began to worry. That's when she heard the sound of a car approaching. "Edward?" she called, moving the wheelchair toward the sound. "It's me," he answered, his voice strangely controlled. "Everything's ready for our excursion. The lookout is incredible." "You were gone so long, we were worried. I had to check some details. Come on, get ready. We'll bring a snack." Something in his tone left Lauren uneasy, but she obeyed. Perhaps this excursion was exactly what they needed to reconnect. Perhaps under the open sky of the Rockies, Edward would find again the love that seemed to have been lost for her and their son. The car journey was long and silent. Lauren tried to start conversations, but Edward responded with monosyllables. She felt when the asphalt gave way to a dirt trail, the trucks bouncing, increasing as they advanced along a path that seemed increasingly wild. "Where exactly are we going?" she asked, holding Caleb tight against her chest. "It's a special place. Not many people know about it. You'll like the energy here." The car stopped abruptly. The silence that followed was absolute, broken only by the wind blowing through the distant trees and the occasional call of a bird. "We've arrived," announced Edward, turning off the engine. "I'll help you out." With mechanical movements, he transferred Lauren to the wheelchair, adjusted Caleb in her arms and placed a small backpack in her lap. "There's water and some snacks in there," he explained. "I'm going to check the cell signal. Seems like we've lost connection. Wait here, don't move, the terrain is uneven." Lauren felt his footsteps moving away. Something about the situation made her deeply uncomfortable. They were clearly in a remote location. The heat was intense and the silence disturbing. "Edward?" she called after a few minutes. "Edward, where are you?" The sound of the truck's engine broke the silence, distant. Lauren froze. It wasn't possible. He couldn't. "Edward!" she shouted, desperation growing in her voice. "Edward!" The engine noise grew more and more distant until it completely disappeared, swallowed by the vastness of the Rockies. Lauren felt her blood freeze in her veins as the terrible truth settled in. Edward had abandoned her there, in the middle of nowhere, with a 2-month-old baby in her arms. "No, it can't be," she murmured, tears beginning to fall. "He'll come back. It's just a test. He wouldn't do this to us." But as minutes turned into hours, and the merciless sun punished her skin, the reality became undeniable. Edward wouldn't return. The man who had sworn to love her in sickness and in health had deliberately left her and their son for the wild, nature, to do what he didn't have the courage to do with his own hands. Lauren hugged Caleb tightly, feeling his small, warm body against hers. The baby began to cry, probably hungry and bothered by the heat. With trembling hands, she opened the backpack, finding a water bottle and some packages. "Shh! Everything will be all right, my love," she whispered, trying to calm her son and herself. "Mommy's here, we'll get through this." But as the sun began its descent on the horizon that she couldn't see, bringing the first coolness after a scorching day, Lauren knew their chances were minimal. Without vision, without a phone, without knowing the terrain, in a wheelchair with a newborn baby, Edward had calculated her sentence well. Night fell over the Rocky Mountains, bringing a cutting cold that contrasted with the scorching heat of the day. Lauren, still motionless in the wheelchair, felt her body shiver as she tried to protect Caleb, wrapping him with her own warmth. The baby had cried until he fell asleep, exhausted, his breathing now a gentle rhythm against his mother's chest. "We're going to survive," she whispered, to her son and to herself, repeating the words like a mantra. "Someone will find us." But deep down she knew they were far from any tourist route. Edward had chosen the abandonment site well, remote enough that no one would find them by chance, but still within the limits of the property he had acquired years ago when his real estate empire began to grow. The hours dragged on. Lauren tried to move the chair, but the wheels sank into the loose earth. She calculated that little remained of the water in the bottle and used it only to moisten Caleb's lips. Hunger gnawed at her stomach, but she ignored it. Her body could endure. Her baby's could not. As the night progressed, she began to notice changes in the environment. First, it was the wind. It suddenly stopped blowing, as if all of nature held its breath. Then came the silence. The nocturnal insects and the birds that occasionally vocalized ceased their calls, plunging everything into a disturbing sonic vacuum. Lauren sharpened her ears, her heart accelerating. Something had changed. Something was there. A subtle sound of foliage being stepped on reached her, coming from the left. They weren't human footsteps. They were too heavy, rhythmed in a different way. Lauren's breath caught in her throat. Her entire body stiffened, hugging Caleb tightly. The footsteps stopped. For several minutes, the silence was absolute. Then, she felt, not heard, but felt a presence approaching. It was as if the air became denser, warmer in a specific direction. A strong, wild scent, mixed with the smell of earth, invaded her nostrils. "Who's there?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. No answer, just the sound of deep, regular breathing. Not human. Animal. Large. Fear paralyzed Lauren. At that moment, all instincts screamed for her to flee, but there was nowhere to go, nor how. Her legs didn't work well. The chair was stuck in the earth and she was holding a baby. Something moved again, now closer. Lauren could feel the heat emanating from that presence, a living, pulsating heat. If she extended her arm, she would probably touch... What? She couldn't imagine what kind of creature was there, observing her in the darkness. "Please," she murmured, tears streaming down her face. "Don't hurt us." A guttural sound, low, like a grunt, was the only response. But there was no aggression in it. It was almost like an acknowledgement. The presence moved again, and Lauren felt something brush lightly against the wheelchair, making it tilt slightly to one side. Then, to her surprise, the creature seemed to lie down. Lauren could feel the more intense heat coming from a point, near the ground, as if a large body were accommodated less than 6 feet from her. The hours passed. The presence remained there, motionless, just breathing. At some point in the night, when the cold intensified and Caleb began to stir, Lauren made a decision that went against all logic. Slowly, she leaned to the side in the direction of that heat. Her fingers touched something soft and warm. Fur, dense, rough in some places, but warm. So warm that it was like touching a natural heater. The being didn't move, didn't react to the touch. It just continued breathing calmly. Moved by an instinct she couldn't explain, Lauren leaned more, approaching that heat source. The large furry body didn't move away. On the contrary, it seemed to adjust, creating a space where she and Caleb could settle, absorbing the vital heat that emanated from it. "Thank you," she whispered to the darkness, feeling the baby relax against her chest, now protected from the cutting cold of the night. They remained that way until the first rays of sun began to warm the air. Lauren must have fallen asleep at some point, exhausted. When she awoke, the heat at her side had diminished. The presence was still there, but more distant. "Are you still there?" she asked the air. A slight sound of movement was the response. The creature was getting up. Lauren heard the heavy footsteps moving away a few yards, then stopping. Then a different sound, as if something were being dragged across the ground, pushed in her direction. A strong smell of meat invaded her nostrils. Something had been deposited near the wheelchair. "What is this?" she murmured, extending her hand with caution. Her fingers touched something moist and warm. Meat. A piece of fresh meat, still hot. Her stomach turned with the realization, but another part of her, the more primitive part focused on survival, understood the meaning of that gesture. The creature had hunted and was sharing its prey. "I can't," she began, but then Caleb whimpered, hungry. The milk in her breasts was diminishing. She could feel it. Without proper nutrition, soon there would be nothing to feed her son. An impossible decision formed in her mind. Using her nails, Lauren cut a small piece of the meat. She couldn't eat it raw. She knew that. But the blood could help maintain her strength, ensure that her body continued producing milk for Caleb. With repulsion and determination, she brought the small piece to her mouth, sucking only the vital liquid. The metallic taste flooded her tongue, causing nausea. But she swallowed, thinking only of her son's survival. A few yards away, the creature emitted a low sound, almost like approval. And then, to Lauren's surprise, she felt something being pushed against her hand, a hard, cold object. Feeling it, she recognized the shape, a plastic bottle. Full. "Water," she whispered, incredulous. "How?" There was no possible explanation. The bottle was clearly of human origin. Had the creature found it nearby, or was it possible that... Before she could explore this mystery further, Lauren heard the creature move away again, its heavy footsteps disappearing into the vegetation. But something told her it hadn't really gone away, that it remained nearby, watching, protecting. The sun was beginning to set in New York when Melissa Sanders entered the meeting room of Vega Incorporated, the largest company in the group, commanded by Edward Vega. A public relations executive for more than 15 years, she had never faced such a delicate situation as the one now presenting itself. "Gentlemen," she began, facing the 5 men in suits who made up the executive board, "we have a serious problem." On the screen behind her appeared the image of Edward Vega. Perfectly cut grey hair, impeccable suit, calculated smile. The face that graced business magazines and TV programs about entrepreneurship. "Edward hasn't answered our calls for more than 24 hours, continued Melissa. "His last contact was a message saying he was at the Rocky Mountain property with his wife and newborn son." Charles Morrison, financial director and Edward's personal friend, shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "Melissa, you know how Edward is. He probably wants privacy. Since Lauren lost her vision and the baby was born, he's been different." "Different how?" asked Ryan Oliver, the corporate lawyer, always attentive to legal risks. Charles hesitated, looking at the other directors. Edward wasn't handling the situation well. Lauren's blindness, the complications during birth, the wheelchair, it wasn't what he had planned for his life. A heavy silence fell over the room. "What are you trying to say, Charles?" pressed Melissa, a chill running down her spine. "Nothing specific. Just that he'd been distant, irritable. He commented a few times that he felt trapped." Charles ran his hand over his face, visibly disturbed. "I should have realized something was wrong." "Realized what, exactly?" insisted Ryan. "Last week, he asked me to transfer a significant amount to an account in the Cayman Islands, said it was for a new project and that he'd explain later. He also asked me to prepare documents for the sale of some properties." Melissa felt her blood freeze in her veins. "Are you suggesting that Edward planned to disappear, abandon the company, his blind wife, and a newborn baby?" "Honestly," Charles looked directly at her, "it wouldn't be the first time Edward has made drastic decisions when something or someone is no longer convenient for his plans." The room plunged back into silence. "What do we know about the property in the Rockies?" Ryan finally asked. "Not much," answered Melissa. He bought it a few years ago, a remote area with restricted access. They say there are trails that don't even appear on maps. And do we know if they arrived there? Are there records of the helicopter landing? Yes, the pilot confirmed. He left them in Pine Ridge, and Edward had reserved a pickup truck to continue to the property. That's the last confirmation we have. While the meeting continued, about 1,500 miles away, in the heart of the Rocky Mountains, a storm was beginning to form. Heavy clouds accumulated over the rock formations and the twisted vegetation of the mountains. Lauren, still trapped in the wheelchair at the same location where Edward had abandoned her, felt the air change. The atmospheric pressure, the smell of rain, the sudden humidity. Her heightened senses captured the changes in the environment with a precision that surprised her. "It's going to rain," she murmured, pressing Caleb against her chest. The baby was quiet, nursing weakly. Lauren felt her own strength diminishing. The blood she had sucked from the meat brought by the creature had given her some sustenance, as had the water from the mysterious bottle, but her body was beginning to protest. A movement in the nearby vegetation alerted her to the return of the presence. The heavy footsteps were now familiar, almost comforting. She didn't know what kind of animal was accompanying her, but she had developed a strange connection with it. "We're in danger," she said to the creature, as if talking to a friend. "The rain in the mountains, it can quickly turn into a flood." A low sound, like a soft grunt, was the response. Then, to Lauren's surprise, she felt something touch her wheelchair. The creature was trying to move her. "You want me to go with you?" she asked, incredulous. "Where to?" There was no response, just another push on the chair. This time the wheels moved, partially freeing themselves from the loose earth where they were sunk. Instinctively, Lauren used one hand to propel the chair in the indicated direction, while the other held Caleb firmly. The creature seemed to be guiding her, pushing the chair when she couldn't move forward on her own. They moved slowly over uneven terrain. Lauren could feel when they passed through denser vegetation by the branches that occasionally brushed against her arms. The smell changed, from dry earth to growing moisture. Were they approaching some kind of shelter? After what seemed like an eternity, the chair stopped. Lauren extended her hand and touched cold stone, a rock wall. Moving her hand to the sides, she realized they were at the entrance of some kind of cave or hollow rock formation. "Is this our shelter?" she asked, turning to where she felt the creature's presence. A slight sound of close breathing was her only answer. Lauren pushed the chair inside, feeling the cooler air, protected from the wind that was beginning to blow forcefully. The ground was firmer there, allowing her to move with more ease. Outside, the first drops of rain began to fall, quickly turning into a violent downpour. The sound of water hitting against the rocks created a natural symphony that echoed inside the shelter. "Thank you," whispered Lauren to the darkness where she knew the creature was. "You saved our lives again." In response, she felt the familiar warmth approaching. The creature was settling close to her, offering its body heat against the damp cold that the rain brought. As the storm fell outside, in the relative safety of that rocky shelter, Lauren allowed herself to think about Edward, about the man she believed she loved, and who now revealed his true nature through an act of calculated cruelty. How had she not noticed the signs? How could she have been so blind, even when she could still see? Suddenly, something in her mind connected. The creature at her side, its almost protective behavior, the water bottle that had mysteriously appeared. What if it wasn't a coincidence? What if there was some connection between this being and Edward? "What do you know?" she whispered to the darkness. "Who are you?" Only the sound of deep, regular breathing responded, mixing with the thunder that shook the skies of the Rocky Mountains. The rain continued falling throughout the night, turning the mountain streams into violent torrents and creating temporary waterfalls on the rock formations. Inside the shelter, Lauren remained awake, listening to the roar of the storm and feeling the constant breathing of the creature at her side. Caleb slept in her arms, apparently comfortable despite the extreme circumstances. Lauren touched his small face, feeling the soft, warm skin. How was it possible that such a defenseless being was surviving such a trial? And how was it possible that a strange wild animal demonstrated more compassion than the child's own father? "Who are you?" she whispered again to the darkness. This time, in response, she felt a movement. The creature came closer, and something was gently pushed against her hand. Feeling it, Lauren recognized the shape of a cell phone. Broken, the screen shattered under her fingers, but undoubtedly a cell phone. Is it Edward's?" she asked, holding the device. The creature emitted a low sound, almost like confirmation. A shiver ran down Lauren's spine. Did this mean the creature had found Edward, or worse, had confronted him? While these questions spun in her mind thousands of miles away in New York, the search for answers gained a new ally. "My name is Helen Vega," announced the woman of approximately 60 years, entering the meeting room of the corporation. "I am Edward's mother, and I demand to know what is happening with my son and my daughter-in-law." Melissa Sanders rose to receive the matriarch of the Vega family, surprised by her sudden appearance. Helen rarely involved herself in her son's business, preferring to keep discreet on her ranch in Montana. "Mrs. Vega, we are precisely trying to understand the situation," explained Melissa. "Edward has been incommunicado for almost 48 hours. Helen observed each face in the room before speaking again, her keen eyes missing no detail of the tense expressions. "You think my son abandoned his wife and grandson, don't you?" she asked directly. "And you're more concerned about the future of the company than with them." An embarrassed silence took over the room. "Mrs. Vega," intervened Charles Morrison, "there are indications that Edward has taken certain financial precautions recently. Transfers abroad, sale of assets, documents prepared in haste." Helen smiled without humor. "It wouldn't be the first time. Edward always had an escape plan." Melissa and the other executives exchanged surprised looks. "What do you mean?" asked Ryan. Helen sighed deeply, sitting at the head of the table as if that were her rightful place. "My son has a pattern. When things get complicated, he disappears and rebuilds his life elsewhere. He did it when he was 20, after a scandal at university. He did it again at 30, when his first marriage began to crumble." "First marriage?" Melissa couldn't hide her surprise. "There's no record of a previous marriage in the official biographies." "Of course there isn't. Edward paid very well to erase that chapter, just as he paid to hide other incidents." Helen opened her leather bag and removed an old folder, placing it on the table. "Do you really think Edward's fortune came only from entrepreneurial vision and hard work?" She opened the folder, revealing yellowed newspaper clippings and old documents. "My son built his empire on secrets and obscure favors, and he always left people behind when they were no longer useful." The executives approached, examining the contents of the folder with growing concern. "My God," murmured Melissa, reading one of the documents. "This is the truth," completed Helen. "Edward is not the man you think you know, and now I fear he has done something terrible to Lauren and my grandson." Back in the Rockies, the storm finally subsided. The first rays of sun penetrated the entrance of the rocky shelter, casting a diffuse light that allowed Lauren to feel the brightness on her face. Beside her, she noticed that the creature had moved. It was more distant now, almost at the entrance of the cave. Something in the quality of the silence suggested to Lauren that she was being intensely observed. "Are you leaving?" she asked, feeling a tightness in her chest. Dependent on that mysterious being for survival, the idea of being alone again was terrifying. A soft sound came from the direction of the creature. It wasn't a roar nor a grunt. It was almost like a human sigh. Then, to Lauren's complete astonishment, came a voice, low, hoarse, but unmistakably human. "No." Lauren felt her heart stop for an instant. You can speak?" she asked, her voice barely coming out. Several seconds passed before the answer, as if the creature, or person, was struggling to form words. "Yes, difficult, but possible." What are you?" Lauren could barely process what was happening. "What matters is who you were." Confusion took hold of Lauren. "I don't understand." "In the past," continued the hoarse voice with evident effort, "you saved Lion. A lion? Lauren desperately tried to understand. I never saved a lion. I've never even seen a lion up close. A sound that could be interpreted as a weak laugh came from the direction of the voice. Not you. Your blood. Your DNA. My DNA? What does that mean? At Project Laboratory, you donated cells for research, remember? And then, like lightning, the memory hit Lauren. Years ago, when she was still a biology student, she had participated in a research program. She donated skin and blood samples for a study on cell regeneration. The professor in charge, Dr. Mitchell, had mentioned potential applications for endangered species. Dr. Mitchell's project, she whispered, incredulous. But that was just theoretical research. He was studying how to repair damage to nerve cells. Not just that, much more. Am I talking to a lion? Asked Lauren, reality seeming to distort around her. A lion that can talk, that's impossible. Not lion, not human. Something between. The revelation hit Lauren like a physical blow. A hybrid? A creature created in a laboratory combining animal and human DNA? It seemed like science fiction, but the evidence was there, the animal strength, the protective behavior, and now the ability to speak, albeit limited. How did you end up here? How did you find me? Edward. The name was pronounced with clear difficulty, as if it were painful even to say it. He financed. Secret project. When it went wrong, wanted to eliminate evidence. Edward knew about you. He brought you here to abandon like he did with you. The broken cell phone, the water bottle, the protective behavior. Everything began to make sense in a plot so bizarre that it would be impossible to believe if Lauren weren't living it. Why did you help me? She asked, pressing Caleb against her chest. A long silence followed the question. When the answer came, there was a deep emotion in the hoarse voice. Because your DNA made me who I am. You are part of me. If this story interests you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give a like. Tell us which city you're watching from. We'll continue. The silence that followed that revelation seemed to contain the weight of 1,000 secrets. Lauren tried to process what she had just heard, her mind working frantically to connect the dots of a story that defied all logic. Part of me, she finally repeated. What do you mean? What exactly did Edward do? The creature, now Lauren no longer knew how to think about that being, moved at the entrance of the cave. The dawn light revealed only an undefined silhouette. Underground laboratory. Financed by Edward, Dr. Mitchell wanted to cure diseases. Edward wanted weapons. Weapons? What kind of weapons? Beings, like me. Lion's strength, man's mind, controlled. Caleb whimpered in Lauren's arms, and she gently rocked him, trying to order her thoughts. So Edward used my genetic material without my knowledge to create you? Yes, your DNA. Special, compatible, strong. And when you say it went wrong, I didn't obey. I think for myself. Have conscience. Edward ordered. Elimination. I escaped. Lauren's heart was racing. The story seemed straight out of a dystopian science fiction movie, but something about it resonated as truth. Edward had always been obsessed with control and power. His real estate empire was just a visible facet of his interests. And how did you get here? How did you know where to find me? Followed Edward. Saw when he abandoned you. Waited. In New York, the investigation into Edward's disappearance took an unexpected turn with Helen Vega's revelations. This document, said Ryan, the lawyer, examining one of the papers from the folder, mentions regular transfers to something called Project Genesis. Millions of dollars a year since 2010. Genesis was Edward's obsession, explained Helen, her expression grave. He rarely spoke of it openly, but at our family dinners, when he drank too much, he let slip phrases about redefining evolution and creating the next stage of humanity. We thought they were delusions of grandeur, typical of successful businessmen, added Charles. Edward always had this mania of considering himself a visionary. They weren't just delusions, continued Helen, removing more documents from the folder. My son found scientists willing to cross ethical boundaries for funding. Dr. Mitchell was just the first. Dr. Robert Mitchell, Melissa seemed to recognize the name, the geneticist who mysteriously disappeared 3 years ago. He didn't disappear, corrected Helen, her voice cold. He was eliminated when he questioned the direction of the project. Edward confessed this to me on a drunken night, said that sacrifices were necessary for human progress. A horrified silence fell over the room. Mrs. Vega, began Ryan cautiously, these are extremely serious accusations. If true, we're talking about heinous crimes. Why are you revealing this now? Asked Melissa, watching her attentively. Because Lauren and my grandson are in danger, answered Helen, her eyes misty. And because... She hesitated, as if pondering whether she should continue. Because there's one more complication. One of the creations of the project escaped recently, and according to my contacts it was seen precisely in the Rocky Mountain region. Back at the Rocky shelter, Lauren continued her conversation with the mysterious being. Do you have a name? She asked, seeking some way to humanize that surreal situation. A long pause preceded the answer. Number 7, but I think of myself as Leo. Leo, repeated Lauren, feeling the strangeness and familiarity of that simple name. Thank you for protecting us, Leo. Without you, Caleb and I would have... She couldn't finish the sentence. The reality of her situation returned to weigh on her shoulders. Abandoned, injured, with a baby to protect, completely dependent on a creature that shouldn't even exist. Don't thank me yet, said Leo, his voice sounding clearer now as if he were gaining confidence. Danger, not past. Edward will return. A shiver ran down Lauren's spine. Return? Why? He left me here to disappear. Not just you. Saw me. Following. Knows I'm here. Will come with others. Eliminate evidence. The implication of these words made Lauren's blood freeze in her veins. Edward had not only abandoned her to die, now, knowing of Leo's presence, he would return to ensure that neither of them could reveal his secrets. How much time do we have? She asked, fear giving way to cold determination. Little. Hours, maybe. Helicopter. I heard. Far, but coming. We need to get out of here. Find help. Lauren tried to move the wheelchair, but the wheels jammed on the uneven floor of the cave. Her weak body protested with the effort. Difficult with chair, need to trust me. What do you suggest? Leo approached, and for the first time, Lauren felt the complete impact of his close presence. He was enormous. The heat and size of his body indicated a being much larger than an ordinary man. The smell was also different, a mixture of animal musk with something undeniably human. Carry you. And baby, I know. Caves, tunnels, exit on other side of mountain. Lauren hesitated for only a second. What did she have to lose? She was trapped in a wheelchair, weak, without enough food or water, with a baby in her arms and a murderous ex-husband on the way. Leo was her only hope. I trust you, she finally said, extending a hand toward him. To her surprise, she felt the touch of fingers, not claws, but fingers, holding hers. They were large, calloused, with what seemed to be short fur covering. The backs of the hands, but they were undeniably human hands. Hold baby tight, instructed Leo. I will lift you. With surprising gentleness for a being of his size, Leo lifted Lauren and Caleb in his arms. She felt as light as a child, nestled against a strong body that emanated heat and a strange sense of security. Tunnels is dark, he warned. Don't worry, I see in the dark. Darkness doesn't scare me anymore, replied Lauren with a sad smile. I've been living in it for months. Leo began to advance, going deeper into the cave, carrying his unlikely family away from the approaching danger. The sound of his footsteps echoed off the stone walls, creating a strange symphony that mingled with the dripping of water on the stalactites and the soft breathing of Caleb, asleep amid the most extraordinary journey he would never know he had lived. The darkness inside the caves was absolute, but for Lauren, that mattered little. Since losing her sight, she had learned to map the world through other senses. The echo of sounds against the stone walls, the increasing humidity in the air, the smell of earth and minerals that became more intense as they advanced. Leo moved, with surprising agility, carrying Lauren and Caleb as if they weighed nothing. His steps were firm even on the irregular terrain, as if he knew every stone, every curve of that subterranean labyrinth. "You've been here before," commented Lauren, not a question, but a statement. "Yes, many times. My refuge." "For how long have you been hiding here?" 6 months, since I escaped." Lauren calculated mentally. 6 months coincided with the final period of her pregnancy, when complications arose and she lost her vision. The same time when Edward began to change, to distance himself. "That's when Edward started acting differently toward me," she murmured. "He was worried about you escaping, not about my condition or the baby." Edward never worried about anyone, only about the project, about control. They continued advancing through the tunnel, which sometimes narrowed, forcing Leo to bend down, sometimes opened into large chambers where the echo of water drops created a natural percussion. Caleb remained surprisingly calm, as if the darkness and constant movement soothed him. "Why do you think my DNA was special?" asked Lauren, trying to better understand that surreal plot in which she found herself involved. Leo took time to respond, as if organizing complex thoughts into his limited speech. "Your DNA, adaptable, rare mutation, allows stable fusion. Other subjects rejected, died." A shiver ran down Lauren's spine. Others had died in these experiments? How many lives had Edward sacrificed in the name of his obsession? And you were the only one who survived? The only one who worked out? No. There were 5 others before, all eliminated. They weren't perfect, didn't think, were too violent. Only know this because heard scientists before escaping. And after you? Number 8. Still in laboratory. When I escaped. The idea that there could be others like Leo, prisoners in some secret laboratory, made Lauren's stomach turn. What kind of monster had Edward become? Or had he always been like this, and she, blinded by love, had never noticed his true nature? As she reflected on these questions, Lauren felt Leo stop abruptly. His muscles tensed, and she could swear she heard a slight growl vibrate in his chest. "What is it?" she whispered. "I hear something. Footsteps. Humans. Close." Fear returned, to grip Lauren's heart. "Edward?" "Don't know. Many footsteps, equipment, weapons. What are we going to do?" "Another way. Longer. Narrower." Leo changed direction, entering a lateral tunnel that Lauren hadn't noticed. The space was so tight that she could feel the rocky walls brushing her shoulders. Leo advanced more slowly, now almost crawling to pass through the narrowest sections. "This tunnel leads to surface," he explained between forced breaths. "Small opening, hard to see from outside." In New York, the operation to locate Lauren and Edward took unexpected turns. The company's crisis room now included the presence of FBI agents, summoned after Helen Vega's revelations about the illegal experiments financed by her son. "We managed to triangulate the last signal from Edward's cell phone," informed Agent Stevens, pointing to a digital map of the Rocky Mountains. "It was in this region, approximately 72 hours. Go after that, nothing." "It's an extremely remote area," commented Melissa, observing the red dot on the map. "No official roads, no nearby settlements." "Edward's property is about 15 kilometers from this point," added Charles, consulting documents. "He registered the purchase as a private preservation area, which gives him complete access control." "And about the laboratory mentioned by Mrs. Vega?" asked Agent Stevens. "We still don't have its exact location," answered Helen, "but we have this." She slid a photograph across the table. The image showed a modern construction, partially camouflaged amid the native vegetation, with what appeared to be a helicopter landing pad. Ecological research facility, according to official records, she continued. In reality, the entrance to the underground complex where Project Genesis operates. Agent Stevens examined the photograph carefully. Who else knows about this? A small circle of highly paid employees and scientists committed to the project, answered Helen, and apparently some high-ranking politicians and military officers that Edward cultivated as supporters. And what about the escaped creature? This Leo? We don't know exactly what to expect, admitted Helen. According to the reports I managed to access, he has the strength and agility of an adult lion, but human intelligence and cognitive capacity. And, more importantly, he developed a moral conscience that wasn't foreseen in the project. A predator with a conscience, murmured Melissa. That explains why we haven't found remains of Edward, even with his cell phone destroyed. We're dealing with something completely outside protocol, concluded Agent Stevens. We need to mount a rescue operation for Mrs. Lauren and the baby, but we also need to be prepared for whatever this creature is. Leo is not the danger, insisted Helen, her voice firm. My son is the real monster in this story, and I fear he won't leave witnesses if he reaches Lauren first. Back in the caves, Leo continued his slow progression through the narrow tunnel. Lauren could feel his effort, the heavier breathing, the muscles tensed to the maximum to maintain balance, while carrying two human beings through an almost impassable space. It's almost, he whispered, his voice even hoarser from the effort. Suddenly Lauren felt a gust of fresh air touch her face. The smell changed. Damp earth, vegetation, the unmistakable aroma of living nature. Have we arrived? She asked. Yes. Small. Exit. Hidden between rocks. Hard to find. With a final effort, Leo emerged from the tunnel, carrying Lauren and Caleb into the daylight. She felt the warmth of the sun on her skin, an almost forgotten sensation after the time in the caves. We are safe. For now, said Leo, carefully depositing Lauren on what seemed to be a flat stone surface. He moved away briefly, and Lauren heard the sound of running water nearby. When he returned, Leo placed something in her hand, a fruit. Eat. Need. Strength. The fruit was sweet and succulent, probably a type of wild apple. Lauren ate eagerly, only then realizing how hungry she was. When finished, Leo offered her fresh water, brought in what seemed to be a large leaf folded as an improvised container. Where exactly are we? She asked after quenching her thirst. Other side of mountain. Far from where Edward left you. Near river. There's a village. Few miles from here. The mention of a village made Lauren's heart leap. Civilization. People. Help. Can we go there? She asked, hopeful. Leo was silent for several seconds. You can. I can't show what I am. The reality of the situation hit Lauren like a blow. Of course Leo couldn't simply walk to a village. What would happen if people saw a being half man, half lion, panic, shots, capture, or worse? I won't abandon you, she declared firmly. Not after everything you've done for us, but baby needs care. You need doctor. Lauren extended her hand, seeking contact with Leo. He placed his large hand over hers, and she felt again that strange combination. Human fingers covered by a light layer of fur, thicker nails than normal, palms calloused like pads. We'll find a solution, she said, together. At that moment, the distant sound of a helicopter broke the silence of the mountain. Leo immediately tensed. Coming wrong direction, he said, relieved. Not Edward, different sound. Could it be rescue? Asked Lauren, hopeful. Maybe, or side trap. How will we know? Leo was silent, evaluating the situation. Finally, he spoke. I'll observe, stay hidden, see who they are. And if it's really rescue, then you and Caleb will be unsaved. The way Leo said those words made it clear that even if it was rescue, he wasn't planning to reveal himself. He planned to stay behind, return to the shadows, to the lonely caves. "No," protested Lauren, firmly holding his hand. "I'm not leaving without you. Promise you won't disappear." The helicopter was approaching, its sound getting louder. Lauren knew they had only minutes before the aircraft located them. "Promise, Leo," she insisted. "Promise that, whoever is in. That helicopter we'll face together." The silence that followed seemed to contain the weight of entire worlds. Finally, Leo's voice, clearer than ever, answered, "I promise." The helicopter flew over the region in increasingly narrow circles, like a bird of prey looking for its target. Lauren and Leo had taken shelter under a rock formation that offered some protection against looks from the sky. With Caleb firmly held against her chest, Lauren felt each beat of the baby's heart, while the sound of the rotors approached and receded at regular intervals. "Can you see who's on board?" she whispered. Leo, with his keen vision, watched the helicopter attentively through a small opening between the rocks. "Official uniform," he answered after a few seconds. "Not Edward's men. Different." "Police?" asked Lauren, hopeful. "Or rescue?" "Symbol, government. Don't know." The helicopter made another pass, now so low that the wind generated by the rotors agitated the vegetation around the hideout. Then, to the surprise of both, the aircraft began to move away, heading for the opposite side of the mountain. "Feel like going away?" asked Lauren, confused. "No. Landing, other side. Where caves begin." Lauren processed the information. If they were really authorities looking for survivors, it was a good sign. But what if they were people sent by Edward in disguise? How to distinguish friends from enemies? "Leo," she said, making a decision. "We need to approach, find out who they are." "Dangerous," he protested, "if it's trap." "Staying here is also dangerous. We're exposed, without adequate supplies. Caleb needs medical attention, and I'm not well either." She hesitated, then continued. "And what if this is our only means of escape?" A thoughtful silence extended between them. Finally, Leo yielded. "I'll check first. You and baby stay here, safe." "But how will I know if they're trustworthy if I'm not there?" argued Lauren. "You can't show yourself to them, and I'm the only one who can make contact." Leo let out a low sound, half growl, half sigh, clearly frustrated with Lauren's irrefutable logic. "Then, together. But hidden. Close." He helped Lauren to stand, adjusting Caleb comfortably in her arms, and they began a careful descent down the mountain slope. Leo supported much of Lauren's weight, guiding her over the irregular terrain with infinite patience. As they approached the location where the helicopter had landed, human voices began to reach them, orders being given, equipment being moved, the unmistakable sound of an organized operation. "How many?" whispered Lauren. 8 people armed. Search, equipment." They reached a position that Leo considered safe, close enough to hear and be heard, but with an accessible escape route if things went wrong. "I'll leave you here," murmured Leo. "Attract attention of them, then disappear. Watch from afar. And if they are Edward's allies, then I return, fast, take you far away." Lauren nodded, feeling a lump in her throat. The idea of separating from Leo, even temporarily, caused her unexpected anguish. In such a short time, that strange creature had become her only anchor, in a world that was crumbling. "Be careful," she whispered. Leo hesitated, then did something that surprised Lauren. He gently touched her face with fingers that trembled slightly. "You too." With that, he moved away silently, leaving Lauren leaning against a tree with Caleb in her arms. She waited a few minutes, breathing deeply to gather courage, then raised her voice as much as she could. "Help! We're here! Help us, please!" The effect was immediate. Alarmed voices responded, followed by hurried footsteps in her direction. Lauren continued calling, guiding them with her voice, until the sound of foliage being pushed aside indicated that the rescuers had arrived. "My God!" exclaimed a female voice. "It's her. We found Mrs. Vega. Gentle hands touched her shoulders, checking her condition. Several voices spoke at the same time, asking questions that overlapped. "Mrs. Vega, I'm Agent Fleming from the FBI. We've been looking for you for days. How is the baby? Are you injured?" "Caleb is fine," answered Lauren, relieved to realize that they really were authorities. "He needs a doctor, as do I. We're dehydrated, hungry." "The medical team is in the helicopter," assured the agent. "We'll take you immediately. Can you tell us what happened? Where is your husband?" The mention of Edward made Lauren hesitate. How much should she reveal? The complete truth included Leo, the experiments, revelations that would seem like madness without proof. "Edward abandoned me," she said simply, "left me here to die with our son." Shocked murmurs ran among the agents. "How did you survive so long?" asked another agent. "In this region, without vision, with a newborn?" Lauren felt the weight of truth compressing her chest. Somewhere in the shadows, she knew that Leo was watching, listening. What she answered now would define his fate. "I wasn't alone," she finally said. "I was saved by someone." "Another person? Who? Where is this person now?" The questions came quickly. Lauren took a deep breath. "It's complicated. I need to speak with whoever is in charge of the operation. There's much more to this story than it seems." Agent Fleming made a gesture to the others, and soon Lauren felt herself lifted onto a rescue stretcher. Caleb was gently examined by someone with hands that smelled of alcohol, probably the team's doctor. While being transported to the helicopter, Lauren desperately tried to feel Leo's presence, to catch any sign that he was still nearby, watching. The idea of leaving him behind caused her an almost unbearable physical pain. "Wait," she asked when they were already close to the helicopter. Can I have a moment to say goodbye to this place?" Agent Fleming hesitated, but nodded. "Just a minute. We need to leave before nightfall." When the agents moved away a few steps, giving her the illusion of privacy, Lauren whispered to the wind. "Leo, I know you can hear me. I won't abandon you. I'll tell the truth to the right authorities. We'll find a way to protect you. I promise." A slight rustling of leaves was the only response, but for Lauren it was enough. He was there. He had heard. As the helicopter took off, taking her and Caleb back to civilization, Lauren felt divided between the relief of rescue and the anguish of separation. Eyes that she could not see watched the aircraft move away, carrying a part of herself that she had never imagined existed. In New York, at the FBI headquarters, Agent Stevens received the news of the rescue with a grave expression. They found only the woman and the child, his assistant informed. No sign of Edward Vega or the creature. Helen Vega, who had been accompanying the operation from the beginning, let out a relieved sigh. "At least Lauren and my grandson are safe." "The operation isn't over, Mrs. Vega," reminded Agent Stevens. "We still have an illegal laboratory to dismantle and your son to locate." "And Leo?" asked Helen, surprising everyone with the direct mention of the hybrid. "What will happen to him when they find him?" Agent Stevens exchanged looks with his subordinates before answering. "That will depend on the assessment of the situation. If he represents danger." "He protected my daughter-in-law and my grandson for days," interrupted Helen firmly, "while my own son abandoned them to die. Who is the real danger in this story, Agent Stevens?" The question hung in the air, unanswered, as the helicopter with Lauren and Caleb aboard cut through the sky towards civilization. And in the shadows of the Rocky Mountains, a creature that was not fully animal nor fully human observed, waiting for the right moment to move again. In the pocket of the torn pants that Lauren still wore, a folded piece of paper contained coordinates, written with charcoal, the exact location of the entrance to the underground laboratory of Project Genesis. Information that Leo had passed to her moments before they separated. The first piece of the puzzle that could expose the truth about Edward Vega and perhaps open the way for a future where beings like Leo could exist without fear. The hospital. In Denver had been on high alert since the arrival of the FBI helicopter. An entire wing of the 5th floor had been isolated, with armed agents guarding each entrance. Inside the main room, Lauren rested in a hospital bed, monitored by machines that emitted rhythmic and reassuring sounds. Caleb slept in a special crib beside her, surprisingly healthy despite the ordeal he had faced. "Mrs. Vega," called Agent Fleming, entering the room with soft steps. "How are you feeling?" "Better," answered Lauren, her voice stronger after 2 days of proper hydration and nutrition. "Where is Caleb?" "Your son is fine, right here beside you," assured the agent. "The doctors are impressed with his resilience. It's almost a miracle that both of you survived in those conditions." It wasn't a miracle, thought Lauren. It was Leo. But she kept that thought to herself, still uncertain about how much she could reveal and whom she could trust. "The time has come for us to talk formally about what happened," continued Agent Fleming, pulling up a chair to sit beside the bed. "We need your testimony to proceed with the investigations against your husband." Lauren swallowed hard. The moment of truth had arrived. "Before we begin," she said, "I need to know something. Is Helen Vega involved in the operation?" The question seemed to surprise the agent. "Yes, indeed. She was the one who initially approached us with information about your disappearance and about other suspicious activities of Edward Vega." A weight lifted from Lauren's chest. Helen had always been the only person in Edward's family who had treated Lauren with genuine affection. If she was collaborating with the authorities, perhaps there was hope. "I want to speak with her," declared Lauren, "before giving my official testimony. Mrs. Vega, I understand your request, but the protocol—" "It's non-negotiable," interrupted Lauren with a firmness that surprised even herself. "What I have to reveal goes far beyond the abandonment I suffered. We're talking about crimes that you can barely imagine, and Helen already has part of this information. I need her here." Agent Fleming studied Lauren's determined face for a few seconds, then nodded. "I'll do my best. She's in New York, but can arrive by tomorrow." "Thank you," replied Lauren, relaxing slightly. "Meanwhile, there's something I can share immediately." She brought her hand to the pocket of the hospital gown, where she had insisted they place the paper with the coordinates Leo had given her. "This indicates the exact location of the entrance to a clandestine laboratory in the Rocky Mountains, a place where Edward conducted illegal experiments. You need to send a team there immediately, before the evidence is destroyed." The agent took the paper, examining the coordinates with growing interest. "How did you obtain this? I thought you were, well, blind." "The person who saved me gave me this information," answered Lauren simply. "That's all I can say for now." The next day, Helen Vega arrived at the hospital, bringing with her a folder of documents and deep circles under her eyes that revealed sleepless nights. When she entered Lauren's room, she couldn't contain her tears upon seeing her grandson sleeping peacefully in the crib. "Thank God," she murmured, approaching to kiss Lauren's forehead. "When I learned what Edward had done, I thought I had lost you both." "It was a close call," replied Lauren, holding her mother-in-law's hand. "If it weren't for—" "Leo," completed Helen, lowering her voice. "He found you." Lauren's eyes widened, surprised by the direct mention. "You know about him?" Helen nodded, sitting beside the bed. "I know more than I'd like about Edward's experiments. I've been collecting information for months, since I began to suspect what my son was doing with the family money." "How did you discover it?" "Edward was always fascinated by power and control," explained Helen. "As a child, he dissected animals in the backyard, not out of scientific curiosity, but out of an obsession with the manipulation of life. As a mother, I tried to correct this behavior, to channel him toward positive activities. For a time, I thought I had succeeded." Helen opened the folder she had brought, revealing documents, photographs, scientific reports. But Edward just learned to better hide his dark interests. When his financial empire grew, he finally had the resources to pursue his true obsessions, far from the public eye. "Project Genesis," murmured Lauren. "Exactly. An initiative to create super soldiers through the combination of human and animal. DNA. Initially, he attracted legitimate scientists with promises of medical advances, tissue regeneration, cures for genetic diseases. Dr. Mitchell, your former professor, was one of them." Lauren felt a chill as she remembered Leo's words. Your DNA, special. They used my genetic material without my knowledge, she said, anger evident in her voice. Samples that I donated for legitimate research when I was a student. Yes, confirmed Helen sadly, when they discovered that your DNA had unique characteristics that allowed a stable fusion with feline genes. You involuntarily became the centerpiece of the project. And Leo, what exactly is he? Helen hesitated, as if pondering how much to reveal. Officially, he is Subject 7, the 7th prototype and the first considered a complete success. A functional hybrid, with predominantly feline physical characteristics, but with human cognitive capacity and consciousness. What the scientists didn't foresee was that this consciousness would include a strong moral sense and autonomy. Rebelled, concluded Lauren. He escaped when he discovered that he would be discontinued to make way for the next generation of hybrids, more controllable and less human. Helen looked directly into Lauren's vacant eyes. And somehow, he found you, protected you and Caleb when my own son abandoned you. Tears streamed down Lauren's face as the pieces finally fit together. Edward discovered that I'm connected to Leo through DNA. That's why he changed toward me after Leo escaped. He feared that I would somehow know or discover about the project. And when you lost your vision and Caleb was born, he saw a perfect opportunity to get rid of 2 potential threats at the same time, completed Helen bitterly, abandoning you in nature, where your disappearance would be attributed to accidents or wild animals. What he didn't foresee was that Leo would be there, said Lauren, a slight smile forming on her lips. That the being he created and tried to destroy would be the one to save his wife and son. Helen squeezed Lauren's hand firmly. We need to protect Leo, she said firmly. The FBI followed the coordinates you provided. They found the laboratory, documents, evidence, everything. We need to legally destroy Edward. But they're also looking for Leo, and not everyone understands that he's not a threat. Lauren felt her heart race. Where is he now? Do you have news? Nothing concrete, but there have been reports of an unusual creature moving through the northeastern region of the Rockies, moving away from the search areas. He's running, concluded Lauren, distressed, alone, hunted like an animal. Not for long if I can help it, declared Helen, determination shining in her eyes. I have allies, Lauren. Powerful people who can help us expose the truth about Edward and at the same time protect Leo. What kind of allies? Ethical scientists, investigative journalists, politicians who aren't on Edward's payroll, and... She hesitated before continuing. Dr. Torres. Who is Dr. Torres? The scientist who originally developed the technology that Edward perverted. He was removed from the project when he refused to cross certain ethical lines. He's been in hiding for years, fearing for his life, but now he's willing to come forward. Lauren absorbed the information, a new hope being born in her heart. What do we need to do? First, you need to give your official testimony, everything you experienced, how Edward abandoned you, how you survived, but... Helen lowered her voice again. Omit specific details about Leo for now. Just say you were helped by a mysterious figure who knew the region. We need to buy time. And then? Then, smiled Helen, we'll bring Leo home. Home? Asked Lauren, confused. What home? My ranch in Montana. I have hundreds of acres of preserved forest far from curious eyes, a sanctuary where he can be safe while we work to secure his legal status and his rights. His rights, repeated Lauren, the idea seeming simultaneously absurd and absolutely necessary. Rights for a being that shouldn't even exist, but who has more humanity than many humans I know. Exactly, agreed Helen, and for that, we'll need you, Lauren. Leo trusts you. You are, genetically speaking, the closest thing to family he has. Family. The word resonated in Lauren's mind with unexpected force. This being created in a laboratory from her DNA, who risked everything to protect her and her son, wasn't he in some strange and unexpected way part of her? I'll help, she declared with conviction. Not just out of gratitude for what he did, but because it's the right thing to do. Leo deserves a life, Helen, a real life, not hidden in caves or hunted like a monster. Helen smiled, squeezing Lauren's hand. I knew I could count on you. Now we need to act quickly. Edward is still missing, which means he's dangerous. And knowing my son, he won't give up easily. As if to confirm her words, the door of the room opened abruptly, and Agent Fleming entered with a grave expression. Mrs. Vega, Mrs. Helen, I have urgent news. Edward Vega has been located. He's in a private hospital in Washington, D.C., claiming to have been attacked by a wild creature in the Rockies. Helen and Lauren exchanged alarmed looks. He's using the press, said Helen, immediately understanding the strategy. Building a narrative where he is the victim and Leo is the monster. And it's working, confirmed the agent. The news networks are already echoing the case as the Rocky Mountain Monster. Hunting teams are being organized by local ranchers. Lauren felt her blood freeze in her veins. We need to find Leo before they do, she said, her voice trembling with urgency. Please, we need to save him. The Santa Helena Ranch stretched for hundreds of acres of preserved land in southern Montana. Surrounded by gentle mountains and dense forests, it was the kind of place where time seemed to flow at a different rhythm. On the wide porch of the main house, Lauren gently rocked in a rocking chair, Caleb asleep in her arms, while the last rays of sun tinted the sky pink and orange. 3 months had passed since the rescue in the Rocky Mountains. 3 months of turbulence, revelations, and transformations that no one could have predicted. He's arriving, announced Helen, joining Lauren on the porch. The helicopter just landed in the field. Lauren felt her heart accelerate. How is he? Dr. Torres says the procedure was a success, answered Helen, the emotion evident in her voice. Better than we expected. The sound of a vehicle approaching broke the bucolic silence of the ranch. A few minutes later, footsteps climbed the porch steps, more than one pair of feet. Lauren, called a familiar voice, yet different, clearer, more confident. It's me. Lauren extended her free hand, and another met hers, a large and strong hand, still with characteristic calluses, but now unequivocally human. Leo, she whispered, tears sprouting in her blind eyes. You came back. As promised, he replied, kneeling to be at her level. Helen observed the scene with misty eyes while Dr. Torres, a middle-aged man with graying hair and a gentle look, remained respectfully distant. The procedure exceeded our expectations, explained the scientist. The gene therapy worked perfectly. The external feline characteristics were significantly reduced, allowing Leo to pass as human in practically any social situation. But is he still to himself? Asked Lauren, apprehensive. Leo laughed softly, a sound that still carried a slight purr in the background. I'm still me, he assured her. I still have the strength, the heightened senses, but now I can walk among humans without causing panic. The path to this moment had been long and tortuous. When Edward Vega began his media campaign to portray himself as a victim and transform Leo into a monster to be hunted, Helen set in motion an audacious plan. First came the press conference where Lauren, still in the hospital, revealed the truth about her abandonment. With a firm voice and unshakable dignity, she told how her husband had left her to die along with their newborn son in the Rocky Mountains. The impact was immediate. Edward's image crumbled when the public learned that he had abandoned a blind wife and a baby in the middle of the wilderness. Simultaneously, Helen released selected documents from Project Genesis to journalists, incontestable proof of the unethical experiments financed by Edward. The scandal exploded nationally, with members of Congress demanding investigations and the Justice Department opening multiple inquiries. It was at this moment that Dr. Torres emerged from obscurity, offering his testimony as the scientist who had originally developed the technology for medical purposes before Edward perverted it to create super soldiers. His scientific credibility gave weight to the allegations, transforming the public narrative. From villain, Leo came to be seen as a victim, a being created without consent, genetically manipulated and then abandoned to die when he no longer served his creator's purposes. "And how is Edward?" asked Lauren, as Leo sat beside her, observing Caleb with fascination. "In preventive detention while awaiting trial," answered Helen. "The charges range from attempted murder to illegal human experimentation and biological terrorism. His own defense is crumbling, with his lawyers abandoning the case one after another. And the laboratory? Completely dismantled by the FBI, intervened Dr. Torres. All data was preserved as evidence, and the few scientists who were still working there are cooperating with the authorities in exchange for reduced sentences." "And what about the others, like Leo?" asked Lauren hesitantly. "There was at least one more. Number 8, he mentioned." A heavy silence fell over the group before Dr. Torres answered. "We found evidence of 7 other subjects before Leo. Ours did not survive the process or were eliminated for failures. As for number 8, we're still looking. There are indications that he was transferred to another facility before the police operation." Lauren felt Leo tense beside her. "We'll find him," she promised, placing a hand over his, "just as we found you." The operation to locate and rescue Leo had been almost cinematic. While the media and official authorities focused on the bombshell, revelations about Edward Vega, Helen mobilized a private search team, trusted ex-military, tracking specialists, a field doctor. With Lauren's help, who knew Leo's behavior patterns and could predict where he would seek refuge, the team managed to locate him in a remote area of the Rockies, weakened and injured after confrontations with local hunters. The connection between Leo and Lauren proved crucial. He only agreed to approach when he heard messages recorded by her, played over loudspeakers by the rescue team. The bond formed during those days of survival in nature transcended conventional explanations. "And now?" asked Leo, his more human voice still carrying that unique quality, deep, resonant, with a musicality that no ordinary human possessed. "What happens to me? What is my place in the world?" Helen exchanged a significant look with Dr. Torres before answering. "Legally, we're in uncharted territory. There's never been a case like yours, Leo, but we have the best constitutional lawyers working on the question of your legal status." "Science is on our side," added Dr. Torres. "Genetically, you are primarily human with specific modifications. Cognitively, you are indistinguishable from any other human being. In fact, the tests demonstrate superior capabilities in several areas." "But the question isn't just legal or scientific," interrupted Lauren softly. "It's moral. It's about recognizing that life has value, regardless of how it came into existence." Leo looked at her, a deep emotion evident in his eyes that after the treatment had maintained the characteristic golden color, but now with more human pupils. "While the legal aspects are resolved," continued Helen, "this ranch is your sanctuary. Here you can live, learn, grow, discover who you really are beyond what you were programmed to be." "You won't be alone," promised Lauren, adjusting Caleb in her arms. The baby chose that moment to wake up, his little eyes opening to the world. His small hands moved in the air, one of them finding and grasping one of Leo's fingers. The silence that followed was laden with meaning. In that simple gesture, a human baby instinctively trusting a being that wasn't fully human was the essence of something deeply powerful. "Family," Leo finally said, his voice choked with emotion. "Is that what we are now? A family?" "Yes," answered Lauren without hesitation. "An unconventional family, built through pain and loss, but also through choice and love. You chose me when you decided to protect us in the Rockies. I chose you when I decided to fight for your freedom. And now we choose to walk together, whatever the path may be." Helen observed the scene with silent tears streaming down her face. In all her years, she had never imagined that her family would follow such unexpected paths, that she would lose a son to the darkness of his own ambition, but gain another through the light of compassion and courage. The sun finally disappeared on the horizon, plunging the ranch into a golden twilight. The first stars began to dot the sky, and the nocturnal sounds of the forest emerged. Crickets, frogs, the occasional hoot of an owl. "I still have a long way to go to understand what I am," said Leo, looking at the starry sky. "Between animal and human, between creature and creator, between past and future. We all have that journey ahead of us," replied Lauren, extending her hand to touch his face. Her fingers gently traced the features that were now more human, but still carried an indefinable uniqueness. The difference is that now none of us needs to travel that path alone. In the main house, lights began to turn on, creating a beacon of warmth in the growing darkness. Helen invited everyone inside, mentioning that dinner would soon be served. As they walked inside, Leo stopped for a moment, turning to look one last time at the vastness of the night that was beginning to envelop the ranch. Somewhere beyond, those mountains, perhaps there were others like him, the mysterious number 8, perhaps more, beings who, like him, hadn't asked to exist, but now struggled to define their own existence. One day, he promised himself, he would find them. He would offer them the same thing he had received, not just survival, but belonging, not just existence, but purpose. For now, however, there was a hot meal waiting, a conversation around the table, a baby to rock to sleep, a new life to begin building. Leo breathed deeply, absorbing the aromas of the night, earth, flowers, the dinner being prepared, the unique smell of Caleb and Lauren. His heightened senses captured nuances that no human would perceive, while his mind understood meanings that no animal could conceive. It was this duality that defined him, not as an aberration or a failed creation, but as something new and unprecedented. An involuntary pioneer of a frontier that humanity should never have crossed, but that now could not be unmapped. "Leo," called Lauren from the door, a smile evident in her voice. "Are you coming?" "I'm coming," he answered, turning his back to the night and walking toward the light, to a new beginning, to an unlikely family, to a world where, finally, he could exist not as a number in a secret project, but as Leo, a name, an identity, a life worth living. If this story interests you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give a like. Tell us which city you're watching from.